Hi everyone. Sorry, that was my bad. I'm a few minutes late. How are we all? I hope everyone's doing good. Reconnecting. Perfect. Cool. All right, I'm just gonna wait for a few people. I apologize, it was my bad. I was having a last minute frantic to get on live. I think I'm like most hairdressers, technology is probably not my friend. But I'm excited that everyone's here. I can see some people logging on. Hi Jen. Hi Heath. So today we're going to talk about freestyle techniques, but I'm really actually going to base it around a lot of what's happening. For those of you who don't know, I know much about anything. I think New York, everyone knows, is pretty much the epicenter of the coronavirus right now. It's probably very rare indeed that I could stand in my living room like this and actually not hear any traffic going by, so it's fairly quiet. I will say though, and somewhat very positive, I think New Yorkers are very much a keep calm, carry on mentality right now. I think everyone's pulling together, so it's quite a positive vibe, even though we're probably one of the areas that was affected the most. So I have a lot of people there now actually, so we can get started. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jodana and I'm the Education Manager for Colourme in North America. So what I wanted to do today, what I thought would be quite good is really the climate or the landscape is going to change for everyone when we all come back to work. So what is that going to look like for everyone? I talked to a few salon owners, a few stylists, and I think what it really looks like is, for everyone is how do we fit as many clients as possible into the salon once we come back, because everyone's going to be so keen to get into the salon. Everyone's going to want their hair done, but also we're going to be dealing with problems like people having long new growths, probably a lot of color corrections from box dye, so we're going to talk about that a bit today. But also, I wanted to kind of come up with something that was maybe a bit more realistic of a technique that you could use to really do a coverage. But actually at the same time as well give someone some lightening. I do think that people, especially brunettes, we might feel a little bit pale in our isolation. Our hair color might feel a little bit boring. So I think when we finally get out, it's going to be spring, it's going to be summer, and we're all going to want a bit of brightening. So I wanted to really focus on that client who maybe needs to get their new growth done, but also wants a bit of lightening and a bit of contouring around that face. So they also feel a bit brighter after their isolation and not being able to go outside for the last 2 months. So that's what we're going to focus on today. I also wanted this particular technique is super simple, and I really wanted to, if you're going to get back behind the chair, how do you fit more people in? I think one of the ways that we can do this, and after talking to Janine, one of our colour masters in Asia Pacific, we were talking about, maybe a technique that you could show to your junior stylist, your apprentice, your assistants, whoever's in the salon you could really maybe teach them a simple systematic technique over FaceTime while you're off, so that when they come back into the salon, you as the stylist or an owner, what you can actually, and having more people like your junior stylist being able to actually help and do a lot of the work for you. So the more people that you can get to do that, the more you can fit more clients in and everyone will be happy. I think the other thing we have to be mindful of is people economically, they might want to go for a more lived-in look. So again, this technique that I'm going to be working on is more of a lived-in look. So this is really something that could be more for that client who maybe only wants to get their hair done every 3 months. So this is something I think that we will probably have to start thinking about our clients always want to get their hair done. I think that's the first thing that you want to get done. Everyone wants to feel good, and I will tell you today, putting makeup on and curling my hair made me feel really good. I actually sprayed some hair perfume and then I was like, no one can actually smell it, but I hope you all enjoy it. So I think that, that's the first thing, back into the salon again, and making sure that we're, everyone's looked after. So I actually have a mannequin here. I pre-did half of her head because what we're going to talk about, I really like this twilighting kind of technique that's going around. I know it's not really a big technique, but the name, I was sort of Googling and what does it really mean, and for me, it's really something that we're probably doing every day, but going in and, working with some baby lights and some painting in different variations so that you can get different techniques in here and really working on maybe only lifting people 2 to 3 levels lighter. I think we'll move into a time where this more natural highlighted look is going to be more popular. So this kind of technique would be really great just to highlight. I do have one that I did earlier, and I'm going to grab her. There we go. So one that I actually prepared earlier, if you guys can see that, it's really just working with, I just did a full paint on this one side of the head. You can see the side's a little different. And really worked with a painting technique over a new growth and around a new growth to create this real pop that comes through the front, to really contour that face around here and really give a pop of lightness. But this is so low maintenance and economically quite a good hair color for brunettes or people who don't want to come to the salon for too. Okay. All right, so let's get into our mannequin. I actually went ahead and I helped myself out and I pre-did the new growth. I figured that no one wanted to watch me do a new growth application. If I'm wrong, then I apologize, but I think you all know how to do a new growth. So I'm just going to go ahead, and what I'm going to do first with this look is I'm actually just going to section out all of the hairline. When I say all of the hairline, I mean completely around the head. I think sometimes we forget about the underneath hairline, but that is really equally just as important. I think as well with a
Hey
face
Joe,
line.
we've got a question from Meredith.
Oh, hi,
with
Meredith.
the potential of lots of color corrections after this time, will these techniques be good to help with any sort of color banding?
Yes. So this one in particular I think will be good for banding. People won't have that much time, like as a stylist, I don't think you'll have a lot of time to do a big color correction. You might or you might not, but I think that really it's going to be very quick. The two things that I love to use for correcting banding are Freestyle Lightener and Clear. The reason being that you can actually place both of them where you need to. Clear would be something that I would use for a lighter amount of banding, but when you need to lift a couple of levels, this could be great with, so I'm going to use Freestyle Lightener today because I'm actually painting the surface. So what I could do is start breaking up those bands without actually having to go in and do a full removal. So that's why I think absolutely yes, this would help with banding. And I'm actually going to show you the hairline first because I think I actually anticipate the box dye banding. I don't know if anyone else does, but I think people are going to box dye their hair, and you know, I think they need to do what they need to do. I hope they don't, but if they do it, you know they're going to overlap and we're going to be dealing with a lot of banding. So that's where something like Freestyle Lightener, which I'm mixing up right now, is such a great tool or such a great product because you can surface paint it where the banding is and just lightly sort of lift that without having to go in and do a full color correction and just start breaking it up. Okay. All right, so one of the tools I'm going to use today is actually I'm just going to grab this here. Make sure I get it on the right side. I have a habit of pretending I'm left-handed, and I'm not. All right, so I like to use this artist palette in two ways. So first thing, safety first.
Hey Joe, we have another question from Haley. She just wants some clarification on which activator are you using?
Oh, excellent question. I'm actually using 20 volume, which isn't very high. I'm using a lower volume specifically because I just want to lift, I just want to get a sun-kissed effect, like 2 to 3 levels. I don't actually want to go in and do a whole bunch of lightening, in the sense I don't need it to be too bold. One of the other hues I think that's quite, so I'm actually okay for a little bit of warmth to come through. What I would normally do, so what you guys can see is I've just sectioned out the hairline. I like to, when I'm just painting, because it's time saving, I like to paint the entire hairline, and then usually what would happen is I would do it last and lay it back on the hair. Because I'm working with a new growth and I've painted that, I'm not going to do that because I feel like at the end it's going to be quite messy. So what I normally like to lie under here, if I'm going to let it lay down, is some cotton or some perm papers. In isolation, I don't have any cotton or perm papers, so you could use foil is the other option, but really just wanting to, I'm going to paint the underneath here and the backside to give a nice pop that you could see on the mannequin, and then I'm just going to lay that gel on the head so that I don't get any issues with that all sort of going over her skin, because that's the one thing I want to protect. Emma here's had a rough trot. She's been coloured a few times and coloured back. I've got 3 mannequins left in my house, so they're all getting a nice colour service. True to testament that Colourby is very gentle. So So let's go here. All right, so 2 ways I like to hold this board. So with the board, I actually go ahead and I paint the lightener on the reservoir. What I will say, if the lightener is falling off here, then you've probably mixed it too much with cream activator. It needs to be mixed, all of our lighteners 1 to 2, paste-like consistency. So it should be pliable and pasty, so it sticks where it's supposed to stick, but you still should be able to move it. So always we recommend with all our lighteners, 1 part lightener, 2 parts of our cream activator. So the first section I'm going to grab is this first piece at the front. What I like to do again is just grab a little bit of lightener. I'm always cautious, I have multiple brushes, but I'm always just trying to keep the colour on the edge of my brush. And what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to paint into the hairline here. Why this could actually be, why I like this as well for grey coverage is quite often grey coverage clients every 2 to 3 weeks. If you're lucky, you can push them to 4 to 6. But what happens is you just keep banding. Doing this technique, particularly on the hairline, to me with freestyle lightener and a low volume, or you can even use clear, would actually help to break up banding from the hairline, which is where we get the most darker deposit. So again, I'm just going to lightly grab into my lightener here. I'm going to pull back and make sure I have a lot of tension. Tension is super important when I'm painting. And I tend to start in the middle section here with my surface paint, and I'm just gently using a circular motion to paint onto the hair. And then I start working my way out. Some people like to start closer to the new growth, and that's fine, whatever floats your boat. For me, I worry that I'm going to put a big blob of lightener somewhere and I can't take it. What helps me is I can put the product there, and if I get too much product, I can work it forward. So I'm just going to keep painting into that hairline and just brush slightly backwards into where the colour is, but I'm really making sure I don't touch it. It wouldn't be terrible if you touched it, but what would happen is you'd end up with a transition line, which you could definitely zone tone out. So I wouldn't freak out if you touched it. It would just be one of those things that I would be conscious of. I am actually going to...
Hey, Jodana, for the next section, could you bring your model closer?
Oh, Emma doesn't mind. Emma's super fun. She's happy to be here. She will move closer. I won't move now because I'll make a nice mess and then you guys will think I'm a messy painter. Okay, so I'm really just painting and coating both sides, and I'm just going to lay that down nice and flat here. Let's bring her a little closer. Is that better? Or is that too close now? Okay.
That's great, Jo.
That's great. Okay, so I'm going to pull this front bit here. Again, I use my palette very much like a board. So I just pop my finger in and just hold it up like a board. And then I'm going to go in again here. And I'm just gently working my way upwards. And as you can see it on the hair, I'm not pushing. The reason I do that is because I just want to get on that surface of this area, and I am going to hit the back as well. And that way I don't end up with any bubbles or marks in the hair. I'm just gently painting. With a fringe, it can get a little trickier for length. I am going to drop that forward. And I am actually I really want this to pop, so I'm actually going to paint the back side as well, just a little bit through here. And I only brush up when I'm trying to blend.
Jodana, we've got a question from Christina.
Yep.
What are your recommendations if you do not have the artist palette?
Oh, I love my hand. I use the back of my hand mostly when I'm working a lot, like just through here. I tend to just do that, or I tend to just have my lightness spread out onto some kind of, if you have any kind of board, which helps with like an artist paint. I tend to, that would be my other choice, would be here, but I will say caution this because I'm very, I always say I'm messy by nature. I tend to have a few things that I do. I would always just make sure, if you're going to use the back of your hand, be very cautious that you've got lightener on the back of your hand. Don't place it anywhere where you're going to get it on other people, and definitely don't do this, which is one of my early habits. So that would be my recommendation. If you don't have a board, is just work with the back of your hand. And then here. The reason I don't like dipping into a bowl is I find if I dip into a bowl, I get really messy. I think the key with painting is to be as neat as possible. So I'm just going to go in here again. You can see I'm just gently blending up to that area.
Joe, you have a question from our brother Tim McLean. Is the palette quicker? Is the palette quicker, in your opinion, than foils?
Yes. In my opinion, yes, but it's not always the answer. You know, this particular, what I'm doing is I've got to imagine this is a client, she's got color on her hair. My aim here is to lift 2 to 3 levels. You know, painting is great, and to me, in my opinion, you know, this kind of technique could be quicker. The problem would be if you're dealing with very light, then I would go with a foil, because a foil would actually give you more lift. So in my opinion, this is faster for me, but it's not always the answer. Does that answer the question?
Yes, that's great, Joe.
Okay, perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just always, for this particular technique, I'm always just following the head shape. You can see on this side that I've done that as well. I'm just really into, at the moment, working with the head shape, because when I'm working with the head shape, I feel when it's flat. So it's actually laying there, and I feel like that's how the hair falls. So I'm really just into working with how the hair falls. What I do find in these sections, you could make this as heavy or as light as you want. I'm going to take relatively big sections, because the purpose to me right now is just to get a quick technique in the hair. This should take no more than, say, 20 minutes on top of your new growth application. So really, I don't want to keep going in there and doing fiddly little sections. I'm just grabbing bigger sections so that I can create dimension, but create that beautiful light. I am going to go...
Joe, we have a question from Katie. Apologies. Yeah. If you can't show, can you at least discuss the sectioning on the top of the head?
Yeah. The sectioning that I'm doing now? Or the...
Yes.
Yeah.
On top of the head.
On top here? So at the moment, I'm just working from a center part. I'm going to work my way up from the hairline. So each section, what I'm going to end up doing is just following the same line as the hairline, and I'm just keep working up until I get to the top. What I'm actually going to start doing is I'm just sectioning off this piece of hair here. I'm going to take a big section and I'm going to paint new growths to ends. So I'm going to do this more. I'm going to try to emulate baby lights and painting all at once. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint a baby light over the top. And I'm just going to keep working that way, all the way until I hit the top of the head. Right at the top, I would always tend to finish on a baby light. I want to make sure that's a beautiful seamless transition up there. So each section should look like this until you're running out of hair. And I should be able to get the whole way there for you, if you guys can see that. Did that help? Or did that not answer the question at all?
That's great, Joe. We have another question. Yep. Can you tell us more about ribboning the hair through your fingers once the lightener is on? Is that to remove excess product, or is it helping with saturation?
I do it. It's to remove product and just to remove any lumps or bumps that I see, just to smooth it out. It's a habit over time, but what you'll notice is I only ever use these fingers. The reason being I'm just lightly touching it and just smoothing it, and that's it. So I'm just making sure if there's any areas where I've got too much product that I can smooth it out, because sometimes I get bubbles here and I just want to take that off.
And at the same time, Joe, just as a reminder, can you remind everyone what was the mixing ratio for the lightener?
Yeah, 1 to 2. So 1 part freestyle lightener and 2. I am going to show you, so what I'm going to do here with the board, how this can be great for saturation. What's so good with the board is you end up being cleaner. So what I've done is, you notice I'm actually holding it much like a palette, so it's just kind of hanging out in my hand. What I'm going to do when I'm at the ends here, because I've decided I want to get some saturation, you'll notice the top of my board's quite clean. I'm just going to grab that hair here onto the board. I'm going to grab a bit of lightener from underneath, and I'm actually going to paint the ends of the hair here. Why I'm doing that here is I just want to get a little bit more saturation on the ends, and it gives me control. Then what I'm going to do is just gently lift up, check underneath, and make sure that it's all smooth, and then I'm going to let that go. And then I'm going to flip back down into using it like a palette. So this particular technique, I'm going to work through, always making sure that when you guys are working with a new growth, I don't put the comb into the new growth. I'm just putting it into the hair that's not coloured. Otherwise you'll end up dragging that new growth down further and you'll end up with another mess. So painting...
Joe, we've got a question from Noelle.
Yep.
What would you generally recommend charging for this quick service, or what would you classify it as? Partial balayage?
Yeah, I would say like a partial balayage would be probably the best way to put it. Kind of the same way, I would charge the same way that you would charge if you're doing a partial balayage, or even, you know, that in-between service that people get in between a full balayage? That's what I would charge for it. What would I charge in New York? Probably a lot more, so I think it depends on your area, but to me this would be, if I'm doing a new growth that's 100, then I would probably want to add another at least $80 on top of that to do this service, but that's just me. And that's different in each area. So what I'm going to do here with both those areas painted, I'm actually just going to grab this hair. You'll notice I just sectioned a small piece. Literally what I'm going to do here, normally I would get a tail comb, but I'm trying to work really quick. So I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to pull out some baby lights through here. I'm going to actually turn this board around, pop that onto the board here, and I'm going to paint this all the way through to the ends and through the hair. I'm being careful not to paint right to the edge because I don't want to have to clean that off. And then I'm just going to flip that down and I'm just going to paint that and blend that towards the actual colour. And I'm going to let that fall. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Oh, better actually weave it. The other thing that could be great for this is our lightning wand. If you wanted to do that as well. And you could be putting colour on the hair, is just to show you the purpose of this technique is really to get some quick colour in there. So that you can do multiple services at the same time. Be a bit more express. And I'm just going to paint there, make sure that's all good, and lay that down. And then I actually have here, you can't see it, but you can see it, I'm going to see if I can drag it over. I have a towel that's hanging. One of the best things I learned, we had a Masters of Balayage class, and he literally taught us to hang the towel on the edge of your tray, and it was a bit of a game changer for me. It gives me the opportunity to actually not have a messed up towel on top of my tray, I just have it hanging, and then I can clean. This is my makeshift salon, so it's actually attached to my alcohol tray that we have in our house, so that's why you can't see it. And red wine that's sitting on there that we don't drink ever because we're good people.
Hi Joe, you've got a question from Jodana Geary. What do you recommend to separate or insulate the sections? Is it like a mesh? Is it a foil? Is it a type of plastic? What's your recommendation?
I will tell you one that I love, and I actually have it handy. So I'm just going to grab these sections, and then I'll go and show you. I'm actually going to grab it. My favourite tools, I actually love Foil Me Foil. I love Fremar foil as well, but Foil Me, I just love the grip of it. I love the actual feeling. But when I need to separate, you can see it there. This I actually really like. It's called Funked Up Film. Why I like it, environmentally wise, it's biodegradable and it has zero cling. So you literally can pull it out and rip it off here, and it actually is very good just to be able to separate, and it's quick and easy. So this is probably my favourite when I need to separate. When I do use a separator a lot is if I actually like this technique as well. If you're not working with coloured hair, I love doing this technique with a high lift. So you can actually use like HL 101 with Green Booster on someone who has dark brown hair and do something very similar. But the difference using a high lift is you would actually need to insulate it or separate it because it doesn't have the same technology as say the Freestyle Lightener, which is designed with the clay to actually not stick to the rest of the hair. But that's my favourite.
How many baby lights roughly are you doing now on the full head? And then I have another question right after that.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, probably about 10. And I'm actually going to show you here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into 3 sections. The only reason I'm going to do that is I'm just going to try to bricklay a little bit, and that's just to make sure I get like a bit more inconsistency on where the lightener is so it doesn't look too patterned. But yeah, and I can actually, you can see on the other side how many actually, I'm going to take a little bit more off that. Here.
And how do you decide, another question from Katie, how do you decide charging for a partial or full balayage? What's the difference between the two and how do you make that choice?
Yeah, I think it's timing and the amount of product I use, to be honest. Like this is quite quick. So this to me I would charge less because I can do it quick and it's obvious that it's quick and it's not a full, as in I'm not going through every single section of hair. But a full balayage, if it's going to take me an hour and I'm going to use a lot more product, then I need to charge more. So I always base it on time and product. Does that answer?
Yes, thank you, Joe. And
just here, what you'll notice is I'm around the front. This is where I really, I'm doing more of a pattern that's quite, demonstrate something that you can actually show to a junior or an assistant to help you with. So, because I think that sometimes it's good for them to follow a pattern. Most of the time when I'm in the salon, I'm following the haircut, I'm following the hair. So I'm not following the pattern as much. So you can see here, I've got a shorter piece, and this is going to be right around the hairline. So I know it's going to drop here. So you can see on the pre-done mannequin, I want to get as much lightness in here as possible. So you can have a look at how much further I'm going up, and I'm doing more of a slant right here. And then I'll come up with kind of like an uneven V slant because I actually want to pop this hair. And then I'm just going to make...
We have another question, Joe, from Meredith. Does this service, in your opinion, always require any sort of toning or glazing?
I did that mannequin you saw before, which I apologise for the light's not great. I didn't tone it. Anyone who knows me, I just love gold. I think gold should be a thing. I think everyone should have gold hair. And lucky, counting my lucky stars, what's happening now is I feel like gold's becoming more fashion. So to me, if it doesn't need a toner, I'm not going to tone it. But if I need to, sometimes I just quickly refine the hair. And if I'm quickly refining the hair, I might just use a toner. But that's like an added service, so it's a time thing. But I really love at the moment, like this kind of service. I'm loving a colour that you haven't heard of before. It's because we don't have gold toner. It's not available in salons yet, but it will be available soon. And I just love that for a toner because it's that perfect natural gold.
Thanks, Joe. And you have a question from Ali. When and if do you ever back comb any of your sections? Oh,
brilliant question. For me, I back comb when I want to diffuse the hair more. So in this particular look, I don't back comb because I'm really just sort of surface painting and I'm being this is going to look quite natural at the end. I diffuse, I tend to diffuse a bit more on fine textured hair. My reason being that fine textured hair can be a little unforgiving, soft line, and it ensures that I don't have any sort of marks or any obvious paint lines or foil lines afterwards. So on this side of the head, with a foil, quite often when I'm doing like a faux foil or a faux balayage with a foil, I do a lot of diffusing to create that natural kind of seamless effect up here. I tend to alternate between the two. If I can get around it, I don't diffuse the hair, but it really depends on what I'm trying to do. The hair, whenever I want to make it as natural or make sure there's a bit of padding at the new growth so I'm not going right to the top.
Thanks, Joe. I've got a couple more questions. I'm going to hit you with them back to back.
Oh.
How long would this process after complete application? And to lift past gold, do you recommend to cover it with foil?
Yep. So I did the other side and I timed myself. So I videoed myself, which I can share the video on Insta. Sorry, I just messed myself up when I'm talking sometimes. So what happened, what I would say is it takes me about 20 minutes to do this if I'm working quickly. But that also requires that preparation to set myself up to make sure I've got everything I need. And then make sure I'm going, so 20 minutes. And then what's the question, can I lift past gold?
If you're going to try and lift past gold, do you then cover it with foil?
I would probably foil it. The other thing I would do is maybe just up my volume for timing to make sure I can get more lift in a shorter amount of time. The other thing I would do is make sure, we don't recommend heat, but except with Freestyle Lightener, with anything you can wrap it in a foil, but I always recommend putting my my client in the hottest part of the salon. If you've got a strong air conditioner, push them away. I would also increase my saturation if I'm trying to lift past gold. The more you saturate, the more lift you'll get. So for me, if it's, that expression, if it's not wide, it's not light. you know, that's really quite true. So I would up my saturation. But ideally, if I really had to get past gold and they really didn't want to see any warmth, I would actually not paint. I would go ahead and I would foil instead.
Thanks, Joe. A couple of more questions just coming in. First a request, when you're moving to the back, can you turn the mannequin so everyone can see the back application and the sectioning?
Oh, yeah.
Also, what is your favorite toner? And Anna loves your hair color. Is that natural or do you have color on it?
Okay, it is my natural hair colour except for the ends, as you can tell, or except for the highlights, because they are painted with Freestyle Lightener. I believe the last person to do my hair was possibly Kate Reed or Leland Olsen, one of the two, and we just painted Freestyle on 20 into the ends through here. This all up here is my natural hair colour, but what I do is I get a bit warm in the sunlight, or just in general, I feel like my hair wants to take, not everyone's hair gets warm, but it lightens pretty easily. It's quite fine in texture. So I use stone and lilac on my hair all over to actually tone the hair. And it's one of my favorites.
Last question for now, Joe. What is your personal favorite toner to use and why?
Good question. I have so many, but I'm going to pick one. It's always hard for me to pick one. But I love beige, using our beige series, so something like a 9.2 or an 11.2 with an 11.81 or a 9.81. I love mixing the beige and the 0.81s. I think it's good that you can get to the hair. It's perfect for toning balayage. It's one of my favorites. And right now, I absolutely love using it with PhD because I really can be able to tone a balayage surface without actually lifting any of the natural hair, which is what everyone's kind of wanting right now. So I would say 11.2 and 11.81 equal parts and 10% PhD. Oh, Emma, move around. All right, I'm just going to take off the top bit here. You notice I just dragged my actual brush through. I'm just going to wipe that so that I don't get any colour. I want to keep picking that underneath hair up.
And Joe, your model has moved out of the frame. Can we bring her back into line?
Oh, model. Emma. There is she. Emma. Is she in the good spot?
A little more in. Thank you.
A little more in. Okay, I'm going to move that. There's that better?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to, here what you can see, I'm just going to separate the short hair, mostly because it's going to be too hard to paint that all together, but also I'm going to personalize that and really lighten that a bit more. And I'm actually going to take the length of the hair here. So whenever I'm working with bangs or long bangs, I always separate it. So let me go paint here. And I alternate a little bit between V's and W's. So this is going to be more of a W through here. I'm just going to paint up. I'm just going down.
A couple of questions, Joe. Are you leaving sections in between unpainted?
No, but I'm only surface painting. So if you guys see underneath here on a lot of them, it's going to be quite big sections and I'm just painting the surface. So there will be of this section. So if you have a look at how big that section is, and I'm just going to paint the top half of it. Well, not the top half.
A couple of questions as well, Joe, surrounding PhD. Just very quickly, how could they get more education on PhD? And what, I'll find a question about PhD in just a second, but how can they get more education? And what is the toning time for PhD?
Okay, so you can get more education, I'm going to say. I think in North America, if you're in North America, the Colour Master team is doing a really great job of doing webinars and actually educating people on PhD. So I would contact through your distributor, would probably be my first suggestion. And I would ask them if there's anything happening, but also seeing as you ask that question, that might be something that we obviously need to add on KMTV. So Tim, that can be something that we can work on. We
have another question regarding your toning mixture that 1181. Do you mix them equal parts?
Yes. Unless, depending on the hair as well. So I tend to always mix equal parts. If the hair's more yellow, I might mix more 8.81. If the hair's, I don't have as much yellow, so I'm sitting, you know, I'm not quite as warm, then I might actually I'll just do equal parts. But if I'm really at that strong yellow, so a depth of an 8, then I want to make sure that I mix a little bit more 8.1 to help counteract that.
Do you ever worry about any sort of spotting?
No. The reason I say no is I just make sure the thing that you need to do is make sure that the application is smooth. You need to make sure that the hair, where the hair is coloured, you'll notice when I'm laying this across, if I didn't have foil here, I would lay a foil here. I'm just laying that very gently across. The key thing to me would be to make sure that you're always just laying the hair nice and flat. The Freestyle lightener, because of the clay, it's actually going to cause it's going to encapsulate the hair so that you don't get any spotting or bleeding. The only time you'd be worried about it is if you're hitting colour and lightener, where you could create a spot. So I'm just very careful for this particular purpose, and making sure I'm quite neat and laying everything down so that they're not touching. To go back to what I was talking about, not leaving any hair in between. I don't leave any hair in between because I'm surface painting. But if you wanted to make less of a result, as far as if you wanted to colour less hair, you could leave another section in between. So the more hair you paint, obviously the more colour you're going to add in. So that's really to personalise for your client. I am just going to, when I'm in here, I'm always just making sure as well, you can see I'm just using the side of my brush. What I'm trying to do is make sure I don't have any lines, but also I'm trying to make sure there's no bubbles in here. So I'm just going to keep going until that's nice and smooth, because if that's nice and smooth, then I'm not going to get any bleeding. Now what I've done though is I've created a little bit of a mess up here. So I'm just going to grab my towel, wipe it off, wipe my fingers, and then come back. Did anyone kind of notice that my lightener was getting a little bit fluffy? So it starts to look a bit like marshmallow. That's because, I actually always have 2 to 3 bowls sectioned out but not mixed. So whenever that lightener, after about 20 to 30 minutes, I like to have a fresh bowl of lightener. So instead of having to go to the back room, I just have pre-allocated bowls with their lightener and cream activator. I put 2 to 3 on my tray, and that way I can keep getting with smaller amounts. So I'm not mixing a ton of lightener, I'm just doing smaller increments. And then I have them so I'm ready to go. The key thing as well is not to over mix this lightener. You just want to make sure that you're baking it like a cake. Baking it like a cake, that's a weird thing to say. And it really should be that consistency. This is what we're looking for. And then I am actually going to grab, I always have multiple brushes and combs. I'm going to grab a fresh brush. Again, you could see what was happening to my brush. I started to get a bit messy, so that's when I want a fresh brush. The cleaner I am, the cleaner the section and the less chance you'll have of any marks. Okay, and we're nearly at the top here, so I'm just grabbing into one hair that's out in between, but when you lift these up underneath, you can see that all of that hair is actually not coloured. So I'm really just surface painting. And then I'm going to come into my next section. And I'm taking roughly, my sections are around 1 inch to 1/2 inch.
Joe, we have a question. Are you using a different volume of activator in the 3 different bowls?
No, same volume, so I'm not mixing it. I'm just pre-allocating it, so putting it in the bowls, and then I just mix it as I go so it's fresh. Technique. What I would do is I would go ahead and I could mix different cream activators so that I could start with a low volume and move to a high volume. I think the key with cream activators, again, you know, quite often we think cream activators are for lift. Well, they're for lift in some degree, but really what they're for is speed. So, you know, a 10 volume and a 40 volume, essentially when doing even a foiling technique will get you to the same place. It's just the 10 volume will get you there a lot slower than something like a 40. So quite often if I'm doing a lengthy process, I will start with a low volume and work my way into a higher volume to get me more speed towards the end. Everyone that I work with in New York or that I talk to, for any of the New York people that are on here, they like to work fast, so I'm pretty sure they would never pick up the 20 volume.
Great question.
Yes.
Joe, how do you deal with processing time? Imagining that the bottom will be ready sooner. Can you address that?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, just being quicker. If I was really worried, if I looked at the bottom and I was like, okay, that bottom looks like it's going to from the hair whites on the head. So I would just maybe pick out those sections, which should be dry, and I would maybe just spray them with some Staying Alive, sometimes water, but it rarely happens because I tend to, you know, select it basically, making sure that I'm somewhat quick on the technique as well. And if the lightener hits a certain point of lifting, it will continue to some degree, but once it hits its maximum time of 45 minutes, it's really lost its strength. So as long as your application's quick, you shouldn't have to worry about that. I used to always, though, start at the back and work my way to the front. And the reason I used to do that was for that reason. If I started at the back and then worked my way to the front, what it meant became that it actually developed quicker. So that happened to me a lot where I would do that. So that still is something that I execute.
We've got a comment from Lindsay Joe. She has found that one of her bags of Freestyle Lightener has gotten gritty. Is that just something that she needs to mix through?
Interesting, gritty. Yeah, has it been sitting there a while?
I'll take this up with her offline, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say if something like that happens, then yeah, definitely reach out to us. It could just be something that's been there for a while. Maybe it's been aerated, that it's got too much oxygen in it. Maybe it's become gritty. So yeah, I would need to probably investigate that one a little bit more. All right, we're almost there. The streets here, for anyone that lives in New York, it's quite eerie where I live on some days. I'm like, how is there no cars? Nothing's happening. I've been very tempted to go down to, I won't because I'm doing my part to isolate, but I've been very tempted to go down to Times Square and have a look at what it looks like. Okay, my next section. Going to grab, just going to be very careful. And again, this is just one way I like to do it. What I actually, you know, take away for you guys is that I'd want to start thinking about, like, if you have a mannequin and if you have some lightener, if you can, you know, if you happen to be in your own salon but you're not doing hair, but maybe you can get in there and play on a mannequin so you're still isolating. I don't know what the laws are, so please don't quote me on that one. But I would definitely play around and think about, like, how can I actually maybe teach, what's something to teach that to someone, or who could I get to help me so that you could fit multiple services in, or you could actually do quick techniques. Again, the reason this is good for color corrective work is you can see I'm surface painting a lot of hair. So if, let's say you get banding that's only like 1 or 2 depths of banding, then something like Freestyle Lightener in a low volume can be great. Something like this just to break it up. If you're talking banding of like, you know, 4 depths or more, then really you probably just need to go in with a color correction because that's really, you've kind of gone too far there. So this is going to be my last 2 sections. So let me just pull this up. And again, I'm not heavily focused on creating this massive lightness at the new growth here, but where you can see where I have focused, and I'll spin her around, focused a lot of my lightener is at the front of the head. I'd love to take that in one section, but that won't work. And I'm actually going to put Emma down. Oh, that's up.
You've got a few questions, Joe. So, how many sections do you feel you paint with baby lights and painting for a partial balayage? And do you ever paint with any other lightener other than Freestyle?
Okay. Okay, so good questions. I'll answer the last one first because I might have to ask the other parts. Do I paint with anything else besides Freestyle? I paint with high lift. When I'm working on, you won't be able to lift through colour. I paint with cream lightener whenever I'm working with a separator or a foil. So if I'm going to actually, let's say for this particular look, if I was going to separate this with that funky film that I showed you before, I was going to separate it with a foil and do foils, then I would use cream lightener. If I'm doing this kind of open air, that's when I use freestyle, and high lift is the other one. You could paint with the two, my personal preference is not to, because the reason I love the freestyle and the cream is because they don't swell. My important thing when I'm painting, especially when I'm working with colour and lightener, is I don't want it to swell, because I don't want them to get into each other, and I don't want that hair, the lightener, to go onto hair that's already been lightened and over lighten it.
A few more questions, Joe. Have you ever heard about any issues or challenges with lifting power in certain markets that have higher elevations?
Okay. Good question. And did I answer the full question before? I feel like I only answered part of it, so come back to me if you need to. High elevations. In a salon called Double Dutch, the most loveliest stylist. It was one of my favourite places to work, and my first salon in the US. I didn't personally have any challenges with lifting. I have heard that it, obviously with the lack of oxygen, at the higher altitudes, that lifting can be a little bit more difficult. So some people, what I've heard is they actually, they go ahead and they up their cream activator just to get that more lift, because it's going to give them more speed or more oxygen to be able to get there. So that's the only thing I've heard. I have heard it affect the swelling as in the actual bowl as well, that it really doesn't swell that much. So that's all I've heard. But personally, I didn't feel like I had any experience with it not lifting enough.
Okay, Joe, and this is a two-part question from two different people. Painting. And what do you do if the hair has different qualities? Thinking about the ends being a little more fragile.
Yep, good question. So I'm taking roughly between 1/2 to 1 inch sections. I'm trying to take relatively big sections. This is a lot. I'm doing a lot because I feel like I'm trying to just show you a bit more of the technique. So I'm doing a lot here, but I would say you want to take sections that are 1 inch to 1/2 inch to 1 inch. But to me, 1 inch is better because the bigger the section, the more dimension you're going to leave underneath. The smaller the sections, the more chance that you're going to paint through the hair, and then you're not really leaving a lot of dimension. So you want to leave, you know, the bigger the section, at least 1/2 inch, but my preference would be 1 inch, to make sure that you have dimension in between, otherwise it gets all one coloured. And the other part, was there a second part to that question, Tim?
So what do you do if the hair has different qualities, thinking about the ends being more fragile, and what density of sections are you surface painting on now?
Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I just did one baby light here, so I'm right at the top. I'm going to answer that one first. I'm actually just right at the top here. I'm going to grab her so I don't want to squish too much of a lightener, but you can see that I've got quite a small section here. It's probably no more than 1/2 inch. But what I'm going to do here is this is going to be laying on top. I also have got quite a textured haircut. This to me is a good technique on textured haircuts. So I'm working with that texture. So here I'm actually going to take a bit more of I could take a baby light just through the top here, but I'm actually going to take a bit of a textured weave. When I say textured weave in my head, I just mean I'm going to take it a little bit thicker. So I'm not going to, if you have a look there, if I tried to surface paint that, I'd probably end up breaking through. So I'm going to leave a bit of that hair so I ensure that I have dimension. What I don't want to do is have too much lightness and then have dimension in here, and then you've got this layer that sits and it's going to look too steppy. So I'm actually going to take a textured weave so I've got a nice amount of dimension through here. That was the second part of the question though, Tim. The first part, the porosity of the hair. Okay, if this hair was lightened on the ends, I probably wouldn't take it through to the ends. I'm always very mindful, always using lower volumes because I'm always protecting integrity of the hair. I don't like to overlap lightener onto lightened ends. I think it's too fragile. So what I would do is tend to paint down to where those lightened ends, and then I would stop. The other thing that you could do if you wanted to is you could mix with something like 3.5 volt, something lower, and you could actually use freestyle lightener if you wanted to clean them up, or you could use maybe clear or something like that to actually work with them and help even out the porosity. But I wouldn't paint over any area that's too fragile. I would just leave it alone.
Thanks, Joe. A couple more questions. So what would you recommend be the time between this color service and the next one, and also the toner and refresh?
Yeah, so good question. So this one you can see I'm taking a little bit more hair. When I say as well, sorry, texture weave, I'm also making sure I'm not digging in deep because I want to make sure I can cover that whole section, but I am making bigger weaves on the top. So if you can see that. So I wish my housemate was here because she just left so I could do this, but my housemate's a prime example of someone. I tend to not do the same service twice that often. I tend to base it on every consultation, what my client wants, what she's looking for, and what kind of season and where I'm evolving to. So to me, this is a great way to get lightness in. But next time this client comes, I'm making the assumption she's a new growth because she's got grey hair. I might do her new growth and maybe just a couple of baby lights at the front. So I might actually foil some baby lights just to make sure she gets that pop. And do that new growth, and then maybe a toning service to make sure that everything's good. If she didn't have a new growth and I did this service on her, she's probably only going to need to have her hair coloured. To give you an idea, my hair hasn't been coloured for a year. You're probably wanting to wait. She's probably going to wait maybe 6 months, 3 to 6 months. So I want to see it in between because I want to be a stylist and make money. Is I would actually do a toner. So I think someone said like a refining service. I would bring them in and on one of their haircuts, I would give them a refining service. If I needed to as well, one of the good techniques that we have in a lot of our workbooks is also like maybe a hairline illumination. Anything I can do that's maybe a smaller service so that this doesn't become an overwhelming thing to have to do every time. To me, if I kept doing this every time, I'd over lighten the hair because it's not realistic to be able to pick up exactly the same sections. And nor, to be honest, do I want to. I'm always just trying to personalize it. So I might even just pick up some pieces of hair that I can see and pop them where I want to. So I'm always trying to just work a little bit I'm always thinking about the haircut and where she's kind of going, on a bit of a hair journey, and where she's trying to get to. I have a lot of those people that I work with. We're always on a bit of a journey, and I find it quite interesting that I change the technique every time. This to me is just a great way if a brunette is going to come to you in summertime and say to you, hey, I love my natural hair color, but I need something to contour my face. I feel like I need to be a bit brighter. I'm feeling a bit dull. I've been quarantined for 3 months, so please give me something to brighten up my pale skin. Like this would be something that I would do.
Joe, we've got a couple of questions. Where do the baby lights start on the top sections? And why no foil or plastic on top of each section?
Yeah, awesome. So I'm just trying to be quick. I don't use foil. I'm trying to be quick. If I have to put foil and plastic, what I'm doing is I'm slowing myself down. But really Freestyle Lightener, the biggest reason is Freestyle Lightener is designed with that silica and the kaolin clay. It's designed to actually encapsulate the hair and not attach to the rest of the hair. So you don't have to worry about it bleeding. The only time I'd use a separator is if I wanted to add more heat, or not necessarily heat, sorry, but incubate it a little bit more so I can get more lift. Or if I was using something like cream lightener where you don't have the kaolin, so you don't have that technology. Tim, the first question with the baby lights, ask me that one again. Did you go away from me, Tim?
Sorry, yes, Joe. Where do the baby lights start on the top sections?
On the top sections here. So on the foiled side or on this side? So I'm going to show you. This is the same technique I actually did. And I just realized what time it is. So thank you for hanging in with me, guys. So this side I did with foils, exactly the same technique, but every single foil that you can see here is actually a baby light. And I actually did a really heavy face frame, and I'm going to rinse this off and show you guys. I'll put it on my Instagram. But you can see here, I'm just going to pull this up. Can you guys see how heavy that face frame is? I actually went in quite heavy around here, and I actually videoed myself doing that too. And then every single foil here, you can see I did 1, 2, 3, 4. I've done about 10 baby lights throughout the hair, and in between that, I take the hair, and then I just take the baby light off the top of the section. So I'm literally just taking a section of hair out that's at least 1 inch. And then off the top, I'm just scooping a baby light off it, or just scooping an amount of hair. That's what I bring back down in baby light. So I'm not doing a big section. I'm just scooping off the top of the section that I'm about to paint. For this particular side, when I use foil, I tend to do the baby light first. My reason for that is just because sometimes if I do the baby light after the paint, I don't want to push into the hair. So I tend to do the foil with the baby light, lift it up. You can see a bit of hair there. Grab my section and paint, and then I flip it back over. and that's how I tend to do it on that side. But you can see that super heavy face frame that I added in there, because I just wanted to show you guys a bit of a variation of, you know, things that you could do that was super quiet. It took me all of about 15 minutes, I think.
So Joe, I've got two final questions, and then if you can remind us of everything that's happening tomorrow and send us on our way. So the first question is, I've heard so much about clear and reducing banding. Would you be able to use clear while doing this freestyle technique? Okay, so clear is great for banding. Clear to me, so you're only going to get one level of lift from the clear. So that would be the difference. So clear to me, you could definitely use this in between, but you just have to be very careful about putting it into the hair where the lightener isn't. The other thing that you would do, otherwise, if it's only like up to one level, you could absolutely use something like this kind of technique, but what you could do is instead of lightening, you could use clear. I like freestyle lightener with a low volume because I also love it for banding, because you could literally paint it on the banding wherever you want to go. Oh, here's my housemate and the puppy. Say hi. Oh, they're all reconnecting. This is Frankie Rose. Frankie Rose just got home with Tasha. So that's what I would, you know, that's where you could do it as well. But clear to me is the best if you're doing a new growth, or you've got a blonde and you do a whole highlighted blonde. Let's say you've gone and highlighted everything that's left out of the highlight. I would absolutely use clear and 10 volume to brighten my blondes. It's like one of the team's like most used products. We absolutely love it. You know, my kit, I have like 6 clears and 1 of each color, because I think clear is just so good for that reason. But I also don't want you to shy away from using freestyle lightener because of the consistency. With a low volume, you can also use that for some heavier banding that maybe is more than one level that you're trying to eat through. Final question, Joe, and I've saved this one till the end because I'm sure this is something that all colorists face from one time to another. Any of your insight on how they really have virgin hair? I mean, it's how can I trust them? How do I trust them enough to know? I think you always just have to use your best judgment. I ask a lot of questions. I ask them, you know, as we all do. So don't get me wrong, I know everyone asks the questions, but I tend to ask very leading questions because sometimes they think that they've put a demi-permanent on their hair. So they've gone to the store, bought a gloss. They don't realize that that's color. So I really sort of start digging in. If they're so adamant that they haven't had it, I think it's really use your professional eye as much as you can and see if you can find the color and make sure that it is colored. But don't forget that sometimes it looks like there's banding, but people's hair color can get lighter in the summer and then it gets darker in the winter. So this can happen as well. So don't mistake a natural color change for color. So they could be telling the truth. If I was really unsure and I really thought, okay, I don't know if this is colored and this could cause a potential problem, I would tell them that I wanted to do a test strand and I wanted to see it first. I would also probably make them sign a waiver. I know that sounds extreme, but I think having like, okay, I'm going to test it out because I want to see how it lifts. And then I'm not going to do anything until I know that, because you want to be sure, that, you know, if you get into it and you're like half, and then all of a sudden you've got colour to eat through. So to me, a test strand would be the easiest way to go, just to find out and just show them. I had this situation, or Nick Lang at House of Lang, I hope Nick's on here, you know, was telling me about a situation they had where they did a test strand and, you know, it was obvious that there was colour on the hair. And that's what kind of saved them. So I think that making sure, do your diagnosis as best you can. Ask as many questions, leading questions as possible, because sometimes they just don't know that that's colour is actually on their hair. Really sort of diagnose it. And then if you're really unsure and you think, I think this is colour, then I would go ahead and test strand. And I love a model release form, I think I called it, like a client, like a liability form, to say, okay, you're saying you've got no hair colour, so we're going to get started today. Does that answer the question in a very long way? Absolutely. Thank you so much for the great education and inspiration today, Joe. Can you give us a quick tip or an announcement on what's coming tomorrow on KMTV?
Yeah. So for you guys too, I am actually going to post some videos. I was playing with hair for the last couple of days. So if you do want to go in the next 2 days on my Instagram, which is Where's Jodana, kind of like Where's Wally, you can go on there, or Where's Waldo, wherever you're from. Go on there and I'm going to actually post some videos and I will rinse her and show you the end result so you guys can see that. What's really exciting tomorrow is you guys are going to get to speak with Kate. Kate Reed, our design director for Colour Me, is going to be talking tomorrow about cultivating connections. She's really a wonderful person. I get to speak to her actually very soon. But I think that you guys will be really excited. So please tune in for Kate. I believe, Tim, tell me, is it 8 a.m. Melbourne time?
8 a.m. Melbourne time, 5 p.m. New York. 2 p.m. LA.
Okay, so all of you here on the East Coast, it would be 5 p.m. Everyone on the West Coast, 2 p.m. So definitely don't miss Kate. Yeah, she's a true inspiration. So you guys have that to look forward to. And then actually he hasn't asked me to mention it, but the next day you have Tim, who's our lovely conversational question asker. So don't miss Tim as well on Friday. Tim, what time is your class?
It's very early, 7 a.m. PST, so LA time, so 10 a.m. New York.
Okay.
And middle of the afternoon for Europe.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so you have all those coming up, and please as well, like the webinars, Jan Patinera's. If you don't know Jan's the foiling queen. She might be looking at my foils and judging them. So, Jan, I apologise. I hope they're neat. But we're going to have all sorts of stuff that will spread the word. So please join in for anything that we have. We just want to connect with you as much as possible. This is just really exciting for us to be able to see you guys on here and connect with you and share the love and hopefully teach you guys something and get you inspired while we're all in this difficult situation of being in our house. Yeah, cool. Is that good? I think... Tim, anything else?
All good, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed your time. And yeah, go ahead and look out on my Instagram for the actual final result and I'll post it there. Thanks everyone. Have a good day.